Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. We're diving into Job today. We've made it through the first 5 chapters, and so far we have heard the discussion between Satan, the accuser, and God, who have set up the context for our story, challenging the faithful Job by inflicting him with suffering. To see if he will remain faithful. And we've started to delve into his words and his friend's response. Job's first response is to wish that he was dead, suggesting that his suffering is unjust, to which his friend Eliphaz, which means wisdom, or is a figure known for wisdom elsewhere in Scripture, I should say, tells him he must have done something wrong, otherwise he wouldn't be suffering. And we are about to hear Job's reply, where we pick up in chapter 6. So if someone would be willing to pick up where we left off.
I can do it.
Thank you.
Then Job answered, Oh, that my vexation were weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild ass bray when he has grass, or the ox low over his fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the slime of the purslane? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are as food that is loathsome to me. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant my desire, that I would please God to crush me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in pain unsparing. For I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh bronze? In truth I have no help in me, and my resource is driven from me. He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. My brethren are treacherous as a torrent bed of freshlets that pass away, which are dark with ice, and there where the snow hides itself. In time of heat they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. Their caravans turn aside from their course as they go up into the waste and perish. The caravans of Tema look, and the travelers of Sheba hope. They are disappointed because they were confident. They come hither and are confounded. Such you have now become to me. You see my calamity and are afraid. Have I said, make me a gift, or from your wealth offer a bribe for me, or deliver me from the adversary's hand, or ransom me from the hand of oppressors? Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have erred. How forceful are honest words, but what does reproof from you reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? You would have cast lots over the fatherless and bargain over your friend. But now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, let no wrong be done. Turn now, my vindication is at stake. Is there any wrong on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity?
Okay. Once again, Job's words are fairly strong. He starts out with the lamenting his own life again, right? Would only that God crush me. But then he breaks off from that, and he's dissatisfied with his friends, right? My companions are treacherous like a torrent bed. He's upset at the treatment that they've given him. He had hoped that his friends would come and comfort or support him, perhaps even help him with his dilemma, and yet their response is criticism. you must have done something wrong in order to deserve this, right? Um, Sadly, we hear that kind of argument sometimes in the world.
All the time.
People are getting what they deserve when bad things happen to them, right? They must have done something.
Especially if you're Catholic, right?
I'm not going to critique other denominations. There are plenty of Lutheran pastors who will go down that same path too, I'm sure. But that's the prevailing wisdom, right? You must have done something to deserve this.
I don't know enough about the Hebrew religion to, other than the Old Testament, obviously it's similar, but in their daily practice of their religion, do they basically focus on, if I am good, I will be blessed, and if I am bad, I will be cursed?
We're talking about ancient Israel, right?
Well, and today.
So modern Judaism is divided in similar ways to Christianity, in that there are cultural Jews. There are those who don't practice a particular religion around Judaism, but practice many of the cultural elements. So they won't eat pork, they won't mix meat and dairy, they'll wear certain clothes, things like that, but not for religious reasons, but cultural ones, right? So that's we don't have. I mean, technically we don't have cultural Christians, although realistically we do. In Judaism there are kind of three main groupings. There's the conservative, the reform, and the traditional Hasidic. And so the traditional Hasidic are the ones who are the most rigid in their interpretation. They most rigidly follow the laws, and to the best of my understanding, the argument is you follow the laws because God commands them. However, there is also a belief that bad things happen because people break the commandments, right? It gets complex, but there's that. Among the conservative and reform Jews, and I can never remember which one is more strict of the two. One of the two is more strict than the other, but they're more like a moderate and less strict, the two of them. And both of those groupings within Judaism today tend to be a little more focused on the responsibility of Jews to better the world, to better God's creation. And I'm generalizing here, but the emphasis is less on we need to be good and keep to ourselves and follow our rules than it is on our responsibility to creation. Within the ancient world, it gets really complex because, well, first off, we only know what's in the Bible, or maybe a few other documents. And you're also talking about a span of at least 1,800 years. And by some accounts, a lot more than that. So it really depends where in history you're talking about. So for the time that Job is written in, which is right around the time of the exile, give or take a little, the culture very much, at least as we understand through Scripture, very much emphasizes the idea that if bad things happen, it's because God's done them to us, right? And if God does this to us, there must be a reason, because God does not act impulsively or without reason, right? So the prevailing wisdom at this time would be that, yeah, bad things happen to people because they've done something wrong. Whether or not people actually lived that out or not is more complex, and we don't really know that, how much people lived out that belief system. But generally, throughout human history, when you're talking about the ancient world, the belief was more that bad things were caused by the divine entities or spirits or whatever, no matter which culture you go into. And therefore, there must be some reason for it. Now, the further back you go, and then this is a vague generalization, but the further back you go in most cultures, the more that kind of punishment has to do with offending the gods. So it's not necessarily you're a bad person and you got punished for being a bad person, so much as it is you did something that offended the gods. So Greek mythology is a really good example where it's like you can run around and be greedy and abuse people and do all kinds of horrible things, but then you go to the temple and you give your money and whatnot and participate in the rituals, and the god likes you, so you're okay, right? But of course it also then gets very complex. Within Judaism, between the exile and the time of Jesus, the turn of the millennium, the anthropologists have argued that there's a gradual shift and a discussion around these concepts. And of course, we get it here in Job, where Job is contending with traditional wisdom. And in Ecclesiastes, we get a similar argument that things are not necessarily that clean cut, right? Life doesn't really necessarily work that way. But we also shift in our understanding of economics towards a more rigid interpretation of a limited goods society. Most of the ancient world lived in a limited goods society. It's the idea that there's only so much out there, and so if one person has more than others, then they have an unfair amount of it. And that can be anything. That can be money, that can be land, that can be women. Legitimately, that was sometimes an issue. So in the very ancient world, it's not clear if there was a contention over does that mean that a person who has more is bad. As we get into the biblical era, especially as we get towards the intertestamental period, 200 BC and on, around there, and then into the era around and after Jesus, including some of the early rabbis like Hillel, we get a different take on a limited goods society, which is to suggest that if somebody has more than others, that's actually an indication that they've done something wrong, right? And the principal argument being that if we are just people living in a just society, living under a just God, then those who had more would share with those who have less, because there's only so much to go around. So now shift that to our modern era today, and this really the trigger point for the change in our perception of economics is like Adams and early American history, the development of the idea of credit and the use of other people's money to do stuff, which is sort of the one of the key components of capitalism, is this idea that there are no limits. You can borrow money forever and ever from everywhere, and you can spend other people's money to do things like build businesses and industries and nations and whatnot. And that's become one of the driving characteristics of our modern approach to economics, which is an unlimited goods society. And as human beings in the Western world, we behave as if there is no limit to the goods in the world. So we use credit cards to spend money we don't have. We consume non-renewable resources far faster than they're generated. I mean, What's our oil consumption? We consume something like 10,000 years worth of oil production per day or something like that now. Like the world can never keep up with our oil consumption. And we have our approach to resources in the world is that there's no limit on them. There will just always be resources.
But that has shifted. I mean, if you go back to the 70s, the talk was we had to conserve because there's a limited supply. For some reason, that whole concept of a limited supply just totally went away. And there still is a limited supply. It's just bigger than they thought it was back then, but there's a limited supply. I mean, that's my biggest argument for we gotta switch to renewable energy and stuff.
Right.
Ain't gonna run out.
So with certain resources, that's becoming more, generally over the last 100 years, we have shifted more to acknowledging that certain resources are limited. Oil is one of the prime examples, oil and coal. But we don't acknowledge limited resources in other ways. For example, our concept of money is unlimited. The government can always print more, right? I mean, if you actually...
Once again, that's shifted. I mean, if you ask my parents that question, they'd say, oh, no, that's not true. It can't be unlimited.
But depending on who you're talking to, there's different aspects. The Depression certainly contributed to a temporary shift, but as a society, the United States has been, for most of its lifetime, an unlimited goods society. The belief that there's always more out there, and whether an individual has that or not is different from whether or not we as a society believe it. Part of our Western culture, it has the notion that if I make $50,000 a year and you make $60 million a year, that your $60 million a year has no bearing on whether or not I can make more. Right? That's the difference between a limited goods society and an unlimited goods society. In a limited goods society, for you to make $60 million a year and for me to make $50,000 a year, it means that you're consuming so much of the annual resources that my ability to increase my wages, to increase my income, is limited by the fact that you make more. We have never in American culture, in an American society, believed that to be the case. But in the ancient world, at least in the intertestamental period through quite some time after Jesus, we did believe that, or people did believe that. Now, which is true, but that's debatable and it's complicated. Of course, in Jesus' time, they were using actual gold and silver for things, so it's kind of debatable. And there was credit, but that's a whole messy other discussion. But in our world, money is fictitious. It's not even real. Most of the American dollars are not actually made. They're digital currency. They exist in the cloud. It's not even real anymore. I mean, technically, yes, there's dollar bills somewhere sitting at a bank, but if you take dollar bills and you put them in the bank and they never move for 50,000 years, are they really real? I mean, that money is being spent without the dollar bills ever moving. So, is our money even real anymore? It's not. It's imaginary. It's more funny money than monopoly money.
Except for the fact that society attaches a value to what we call the dollar.
We used to.
The dollar equals one face mask at dollar store.
Okay.
So it's attached to a good.
But there's no central good that it's attached to anymore. It's now just whatever you think it's worth.
No.
The same mask might sell for $1 at the dollar store, but if you go down to Walmart, it might be 95 cents, and if you go over to Oliver's, it might be $1.50. And
right.
So what's the dollar worth? Is it worth 95 cents, $1, or $1.50?
It's in that range.
So if I can successfully convince somebody to buy the same mask for $50, now the dollar's worth $50.
Yeah.
Isn't that made up then? Isn't that imaginary?
No, it's determined by the supply and demand.
Right. So it's
So
whatever.
it's not
it's-
imaginary. There's supply and there's demand, and
Right.
that's not imaginary.
Sure it is. Because it's whatever you and I imagine it's worth.
No.
If two people get together and agree upon selling one thing for a certain dollar amount, which is something they're making up in their heads,
If you think that mask is worth $2, and I can go to the next store and it's worth $1.20, then it's worth $1.20 in that environment.
right?
But it's got a value.
Right, but there's no actual difference between that and children running around on the playground. If I go pew 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 and you fall over dead, we're making believe, but we've agreed that something is real for us for this moment in this context. We're playing an imaginary game. But if I run around and I go pew 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 and you say, "Oh, I have a shield," and you missed, it's the same thing.
No, it's not. No, because it's attached. The goods that you're seeking with that dollar
Okay,
is real.
so
Is a physical substance.
okay, but what about the tip you give to the delivery driver? There's no physical substance attached to that.
Well, it depends on how much you liked it,
Well, right, but that's a make believe
or
thing.
how much you
It's
need
like
it.
labor cost, I mean.
Sure, but that's all made up. Again, that's the
Yeah,
same
you
as
put that-
the shield versus the laser gun.
Yeah.
It's all imaginary. We've decided that it means something, but it's all made up. There's nothing concrete backing most Western currency anymore. It's entirely based on our
Well,
willingness to believe that it has value.
That's true.
That's what
there is
imaginary
not- There
is.
is not one physical substance or physical thing that defines the value, but there is the need and the supply within the society that determines the value.
Right. But that's
So
still all,
if you charge,
it's still all made up.
if
It's
you charge
still all imaginary.
50,000 for a car, and 99% of the people in your society can't pay it, then that car is worthless.
Right. The difference is, if I give you a chicken for you to have for dinner and you give me a coat to keep me warm for the winter,
Yeah.
you've received a concrete benefit from our trade, and so have I.
Well,
But if I give
no,
you-
no,
no.
If you give me a chicken and I give you $1, and then you take that dollar and go buy yourself a mask, then there's a concrete value to that chicken.
Only so long as
It's just the dollar is a means of transferring the
Right.
value.
as long as we pretend that that's true.
It's true when you eat the chicken.
Right, but it's only true as long as we agree that those dollars have value.
That's right.
And
That's
it's-
right. Everybody in the society has to agree
Right.
that based on the law of supply and demand, how much that dollar is worth for that particular
Right.
substance.
And that's why it's imaginary, because it's
not imaginary.
entirely based on belief. If everyone in the United States stopped believing the dollar had any value at all, it would have zero value, which means 100% of the value of American currency is based on our belief that it has value.
That's not true,
Yes,
because
it
when
is.
you got hungry and you needed that chicken to eat, then somebody who had that chicken would be willing to take $1.
But only if they believed it was worth something. That's my point. It's entirely based on belief.
It probably isn't anymore, but didn't like $1 was a certain amount of gold that they put?
Prior
Well,
to
that's the gold standard.
Prior to
That went away a long
1933.
time
Oh,
ago.
okay. so-
That went away in 1933.
Okay.
I still have some actual gold and silver certificates.
So my dad had a couple coins in it.
No, I mean the dollar bills, they actually were printed and supposedly you could go down to the treasury and turn them in for actual silver and gold.
Would they? Were there silver and gold certificates? Because I got silver certificates.
I guess so.
There were gold certificates
Yep.
too?
Yeah, the bigger bills, they were only in bigger bills because gold was more valuable, still is. But anyways, the distinction here is that because of the belief in a limited goods society, that there's only so much to go around, and if somebody has more than somebody else, that it's limiting other people in their abilities to have resources, to do things, to acquire. That contributes to this view that suffering in the world is contingent upon one's behavior in relationship to the divine, or in following the behavior of the divine. It's one of the interesting characteristics that if we apply, now wealth doesn't seem to have that issue here in Job. Jesus will make a bigger issue of that later on. But Job clearly is a very well-off person, right? He has tracts and tracts of land and many, many animals, and he's pretty well-to-do. And there doesn't seem to be any criticism of that or any acknowledgement on Job's part that, well, I was wealthy, therefore I've done something wrong. We got way off topic. So, anyways, anything else in here jump out at you? I'll give you a moment to sort of catch up.
So his wealth was really because he was good. Wasn't that the idea that God gave him all that wealth?
Well, it's a little more ambiguous if we go back into like chapters 1 and 2. The accuser's argument is that God has protected him. It doesn't necessarily mean that
Gave it to him.
the wealth was the product of God's blessing. Although someone could try to make that argument, because it doesn't come right out and say one way or the other. But yeah, God has protected him from harm, and that's why he's faithful, is the accuser's argument.
The thing that struck me as we were reading this is the author is very good doesn't describe it, but he uses images in such a beautiful or descriptive way. For instance, when he's described someone who withholds kindness from a friend, they're treacherous as a torrent bed, as freshets that pass away, which are dark with ice, and where the snow hides itself. In time of heat they disappear, when it's hot they vanish from their place. I mean, the imagery there is just kind of beautiful.
It is. It's, as much as it is. I had a friend in undergraduate school at UW who was trying to make the argument that Job is actually a dark comedy, which you can that combination of beautiful language to describe something unpleasant.
Yeah, actually, when you read what I just read, you think a little bit of the English author, the famous English author from the 1600s or 1800s, Shakespeare. Yeah.
Oh.
It almost reads like Shakespearean stuff.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is
it just flows, and the imagery is sort of brilliant.
It is worth acknowledging, because you're bringing up Shakespeare, that the language used in the original King James translation is similar culture, linguistic era as Shakespeare, and Western Christian society or at least English-speaking Western Christian society was built up on this King James Bible translation. And so translations in general have always kind of shifted a little bit towards that style in translation because culturally it's been ingrained in us enough that we are a bit resistant to to anything that loses that sort of King James style of poetic language. But
Have
the
you read,
imagery here is
have
still
you read Job in Hebrew?
a while ago.
And did you get the same feeling from reading it in Hebrew as we do in our translations?
I would not describe it as Shakespearean, but it is, I mean, it's descriptively poetic. So yeah, it has that to it. So verse 23 on is kind of interesting because he essentially is shoving it back in his friends' faces. Yeah, I mean, he says, teach me and I will be silent. In other words, I didn't do anything wrong. Prove it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Make me understand how I've gone wrong. How forceful are honest words. But your reproof, what does it reprove? Yeah, he's questioning whether or not there's any legitimacy in their rebuke. But he's going to go on. Would someone like to pick up in 7 for us?
I'll do 7. Do not mortals have hard service on earth? Are not their days like those of hired laborers? Like a slave longing for the evening shadows, or a hired laborer waiting to be paid? I have been allotted months of futility, and nights of misery have been assigned to me. When I lie down, I think, how long before I get up? The night drags on, and I toss and turn until dawn. My body is clothed with worms and scabs. My skin is broken and festering. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and they come to an end without hope. Remember, O God, that my life is but a breath. My eyes will never see happiness again. The eye that now sees me will see me no longer. You will look for me, but I will be no more. As a cloud vanishes and is gone, so one who goes down to the grave does not return. He will never come to his house again. His place will know him no more. Therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the monster of the deep that you put me under guard? When I think my bed will comfort me and my couch will ease my complaint, even then you frighten me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I prefer strangling and death rather than this body of mine. I despise my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone. My days have no meaning. What is mankind that you make so much of them, that you give them so much attention, that you examine them every morning and test them every moment? Will you never look away from me or let me alone, even for an instant? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, you who see everything we do? Why have you made me your target? Have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my offenses and forgive my sins? For I will soon lie down in the dust. You will search for me, but I will be no more.
Okay.
Oh, woe is me.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, it's woe is me, but he's really still arguing against who was it? Eliphaz, I think, that spoke in 4 and 5. Yeah, Eliphaz.
Yeah.
I mean, so Eliphaz's argument was basically, you know, you've obviously you've done something wrong, and that's why you're being punished. But don't worry, all you have to do is repent of that, and then, you know, everything will get back to normal. Everything will be okay. In essence, he's arguing whatever people are suffering in the world, if you just turn and do everything right, everything will turn out fine, right? And he's not just saying, woe is me. He's saying, you're wrong. I mean, when a person's dead, they're going to be dead. You can't fix that by being a better person. You can't fix that by turning and praising God. I'm here at the point where literally the bugs are starting to devour my flesh. The worms are crawling on my skin. I'm not going to grow that back just by apologizing to God, right? It's not just woe is me. He's countering Eliphaz's argument. Yeah, I mean, in 6, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. So, in other words, I don't have many days left to live. That's how much I'm suffering. And they come to their end without hope. There is no chance of this turning about, right? That's his argument. You can't just go to people who are sick and say, hey, everything's going to be fine. Just don't worry. All you got to do is be better, and you'll stop being sick. You can't go to the poor and say, hey, just be a better synagogue or temple attender, and God will fix your poverty. That doesn't do that. I mean, that's his argument, right? He's still contending with the classic wisdom. So it's more than, it sounds like complaint, but it's more than complaint. It's an argument, right? And this is the argument they're having. It's the argument we're having right now in the world of Christianity. Because if you turn to the televangelists, many of the televangelists of today say, hey, you're feeling sick at home, you've got chronic illness. If you just send more money to this church, to God, God will come and bless your life. That's the argument, right?
I don't know, I don't listen to
It's the ancient
I
wisdom.
don't either, but that's true.
I mean, how do you think some of them are on their 5th private jet?
Exactly.
That's the argument. And some of the tactics that they use are disturbing. And then the rest of the Christian world who doesn't preach the prosperity gospel either offers all I'm going to talk about is grace, we won't mention those other parts, or offers the much more critical, no, you can't just fix your problems by giving money to the church. As much as we love having the money to do mission and ministry, that's not the solution. That's not what God is telling us. It's not magic spells and quick fixes. So it's interesting that here we have that debate raging between these two people in a biblical story, and it's still a debate that rages today, 2,600 years later. So, anything else jump out at you in this one?
Well, the concept of forgiveness in 21, why dost thou not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? I mean, the concept of forgiveness comes out there.
Yeah.
Does it not?
Yeah, to a point. I mean, Job is still making the argument here. I don't think he's actually questioning God. Like, why am I not being pardoned?
No, he's questioning his friend. Why aren't you forgiving me?
No. This part he's speaking to God, because if we go back if you go back one verse, if I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity?
Oh, he's not talking to his friend there.
At the very end, he's turning to question God, and I don't think so. To be clear, I don't think he's actually intending to speak to God. This is more one of those, like, I'm going to ask God a rhetorical question. I'm going to do it out loud because I want you, Eliphaz, to hear what I have to say, right? Because he's essentially arguing, 1, I haven't done anything wrong. 2, I continue to be a faithful servant. And so 3, if the classic wisdom is true, then why would not God forgive or pardon me from anything I might have done and take this away, right? It's not so much that he's actually calling on God as that he's continuing to make the argument to Eliphaz by using this language with God. Okay, so he's shut down his friend Eliphaz, but he's got 2 more friends. One of them wants to speak. Would someone read for Bildad?
I will.
Okay.
Then Bildad the Shuhite answered, How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. If you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, Surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore you to your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire now of bygone generations, and consider what their ancestors have found. For we are but of yesterday, and we know nothing. For our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are all the paths of all who forget God, and hope of the godless shall perish. Their confidence is gossamer, a spider's house they trust. If one leans against its house, it will not stand. If one lays hold of it, it will not endure. The wicked thrive before the sun, and their shoots spread over the garden. Their roots twine around the stone heap. They live among the rocks. If they are destroyed from their place, then it will deny them, saying, I have never seen you. See, these are their happy ways, and out of the earth still others will spring. See, God will not reject a blameless person, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more.
Okay. Not a hugely different argument from Eliphaz, except when we get into right through 13, he's taking a new approach, right? Inquire now of bygone generations and consider what their ancestors have found, etc., etc. Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? In other words, can your new learning, your new thoughts, your new ideas stem out of something other than what we've always known, what we've always been taught? In other words, the middle of his argument here is different from Eliphaz's in that he's saying our life is too short to know more than our ancestors knew, right? He's essentially arguing against education, against new learning, right? You got to fall back on old traditions. You got to fall back on history and cultural knowledge, right? That's at the middle. And on the outskirts of it, he's a lot more similar to Eliphaz, right? There's if you'll just do the right thing, God couldn't refuse you. Because God doesn't refuse the blameless or overlook them. And he'll even go after people who hate you if you're good enough. But again, they're looking at that. What is the traditional wisdom? Bildad is appealing to the same source of knowledge as Eliphaz. What's that?
I love the word in 2. How long will you say these things, and your words of your mouth be a great wind? You windbag.
Yep.
This is just, Job is pretty eloquent language, actually.
It really is. It's not easy reading, considering what he says, but it's beautifully written. And you can see why somebody might look at this as dark humor. Right? It's beautiful yet disturbing. Okay, where are we for time? Let's dive into, let's see if we can squeeze out 9 and 10 in our last 15 minutes.
It's my turn.
Okay.
Then Job answered, truly I know that it is so, but how can a man be just before God? If one wishes to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. He who has hardened himself against him and succeeded, or who has hardened himself against him and succeeded? He who removes mountains and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble, who commands the sun and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea, who made the bear and Orion, and Pleiades and the chambers of the south, who does great things beyond understanding and marvelous things without number. Lo, he passes by me, and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can hinder him? Who will say to him, what doest thou? God will turn back his anger. Beneath him bode the helpers of Rahab.
Phil, can you read 13 again?
God will not turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahab.
Okay. Thank you.
How then can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am innocent, I cannot answer him. I must appeal for mercy to my accuser. If I summoned him and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. He will not let me get my breath, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a contest of strength, behold him. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am innocent, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. I am blameless. I regard not myself. I loathe my life. It is all one, therefore I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who then is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skiffs of reed, like an eagle swooping on the prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will put off my sad countenance and be of good cheer. I become afraid of all my suffering, for I know thou wilt not hold me innocent. I shall be condemned. Why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye, yet thou wilt plunge me into a pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. For he is not a man as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There is no umpire between us, who might lay his hand upon us both. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak without fear of him, for I am not so in myself.
Okay. So what's Job's argument this time?
That he has no chance against God.
Essentially, right. Like, not, and I mean, he spends the first 19 verses basically saying there's no way to contend. God always wins everything, right? And he's setting up, I mean, in a way, he's setting up part of it, the first part of his argument, which is, okay, here's the context. Let's just be honest. God is God. There is no contending with God. God always wins. Doesn't matter if it's a contest of strength, knowledge, wisdom, whatever. This is God. You always lose against God, right? Or God always wins anyways, right? Then in verse 20, he switches. But I'm innocent. right?
Mhm.
I am innocent, I am blameless, he says. And then we get an interesting twist in the argument. 21 through 24, what does he say? Oh, sorry, 22 through 24.
Yeah, when I read that, I thought, I'm back in Ecclesiastes.
It does. It sounds a lot like Ecclesiastes. You're right. My mind went there too. Natural disasters wipe out a whole swath of people. Are you saying that every one of them was blameless? No. The innocent die when there's a big disaster. The innocent die along with the wicked, right? And look, you can look at the world and the wicked win, right? He's making these arguments which seem to suggest. Well, he comes right out and says it at the end. And if it's not God who's doing that, if that's not God who's letting the wicked win and seeing the innocent die alongside the wicked in these big disasters, who else would do it? Because we've already addressed the issue that God always wins. No one gets to contend with God. So if those things are happening in the world, it's because God either wills it or allows it or creates it, right? That's the thrust of his argument. And so then he switches back into, and we can't contend with God. In fact, he even goes a step further in verse 33. And there's not even a go-between that can go between us to moderate this issue, right? It's just God. God stands alone on the mountain, on the high peaks, in the high tower, whatever. God stands afar off and rules everything. And whatever is. I mean, it's very much Ecclesiastes. And sometimes that means the innocent suffer, and sometimes that means the wicked win, is essentially his argument there. Right?
It's like he's looking back when things were all good, and he's saying, how come I could control things then, and now God has taken over? Without a judge to say this is right or that is wrong.
Well, not so much without a judge as it's just not even a conversation. Like I can't even talk to God about it. Like, because I don't.
But I get the sense obviously he's distraught, and in a way he's longing for the good old days.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know that he's necessarily saying that here. He's questioning what's happened to him, and previously has said, given all that's happened, I might as well just be dead, right? Job is suicidal. I mean, he's not going to take his own life, but he wishes his own death. So, yeah.
Well, he's given up, but he hasn't, because he's trying to make the argument that this isn't right.
Right. Well, that's the question. Is he arguing whether or not what God does is right, or is he arguing with his friends about whether or not the prevailing wisdom is actually wisdom? So it's more the big question of Job is, are we reading the story of Job, a person who lived and experienced things, and so we're watching a drama play out? Or are we reading an author's story that is presenting an argument? There's, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, there was a movie called Mind Walk with Me. And it's like a 2-hour-long movie where, I forget what it is, but it's this man and woman, they meet up and they know each other, and they spend 2 hours walking around talking about philosophy and life and whatever. And the story's not actually about the characters. It's about the words that they're saying, right? Every now and then we get that in authors will create characters to be the framework to say something that we would normally see put together as like a paper in a college, right? You could take this conversation that's being had here and turn it into an academic interpretation of traditional wisdom. So there's two ways to really read this stuff.
Has Job ever been written as a play?
I don't know. I'm not aware of it.
It'd make a very interesting Broadway production.
It might, yeah.
If it was written by a talented person.
All right, I want to squeeze in 10 for us so that we can finish Job's argument. And he's back to his old case. I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands, and favor the schemes of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as humans see? Are your days like the days of mortals? Are your years like human years? That you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin. Although you know that I am not guilty, and there is no one to deliver out of your hand. Your hands fashioned and made me, and now you turn and destroy me. Remember that you fashioned me like clay, and will you turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk, and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose. If I sin, you watch me, and do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am wicked, woe to me. If I am righteous, I cannot lift up my head. For I am filled with disgrace, and look upon my affliction. Bold as a lion you hunt me, and repeat your exploits against me. You renew your witnesses against me, and increase your vexation toward me. You bring fresh troops against me. Why did you bring me forth from the womb? Would that I had died before any eye had seen me, and were as though I had not been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not the days of my life few? Let me alone, that I may find a little comfort, before I go never to return, to the land of gloom and deep darkness, the land of gloom and chaos, where light is like darkness.
Woe is me.
Well, somewhat. It's still woe is me, but he's also still making an argument here. So, he's presenting here three cases, right? He says, if I'm blameless, which I argue I am, if I'm blameless, God, you still look at what you've done to me. Look at how I've suffered if I'm blameless. If I'm wicked, if I've done something wrong, then you've done this to me because of that, right? But he also says, let me see if I can find this.
15, I think.
No, verse 3. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands, and favor the schemes of the wicked? So he's saying, okay, I think I'm blameless. I don't think I've done anything wrong, but this has happened to me. So either it's happened to me despite the fact that I'm blameless, or it's happened to me because I've done something wrong, and God's paid particular attention. I mean, he says, where is it? Your eye is on my sin, or something along those lines, right? Bold as a lion, you hunt me. You renew your witness against me. It was in here somewhere where he says, something about your eye is on my sin. But essentially, he's arguing there are plenty of people who are out there wicked and never have anything like this happen to them, right? Right. In other words, I'm pretty blameless, or at least I'm pretty sure I'm blameless. And he doesn't come right out and say it, but if I'm not blameless, if I've done something wrong, I'm not even aware of what it is, right? So whatever I've done wrong can't be all that bad in the grand scheme of things, and yet look what's happening to me. And in contrast, there are people who are blatantly wicked out there, and God's not punishing them, right? So even if, essentially the argument is, even if traditional wisdom is true, that punishment is the product of sinful behavior, and even though I think I'm blameless, this is a punishment from God because of my sinful behavior, even if that's true, and I think it's not proportionate. It's not fairly distributed, right? That's essentially what he's arguing right now. And so the amount, his woe to me in this chapter is not just a woe to me, but it's woe that I suffer so disproportionately, right? It's like, if this is going to be the kind of infliction I'm going to get for whatever I might have done, then I might as well be dead. Because how do you, and then within the context of his broader argument between friends here, if you can't contend with God, if you can't ask for justification or explanation of what's going on, then what point is there to anything? If this is the way the wisdom lays out. Because I can't argue my case. I can't petition to be informed about what I've done wrong. And if I suffer this degree of punishment, something's out of whack, essentially. And then at that point, if the balance of punishment in relation to sinful behavior is this out of whack, then what point is there for anyone who's suffering, right? That's his argument. It's not even just woe to me, it's woe to anyone who's suffering disproportionately and greatly, right? There's just not a point to it if it's going to be that arbitrary. So that's kind of a dark note to end on, but we're out of time. Job's got one more friend, Zophar, and he's going to come back and he's going to give us another argument, and then his friends will all try to argue with him one or two more times, and then we'll get to the wrap up after that. So we'll close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for tuning in and checking us out. We hope you'll come back and watch more of these. And we should be back next week with the next episode of Job. Peace be with you. Have a wonderful week.